All right, you've done the hard work. You've planned, gathered evidence, tested, and peered inside the black box. But let me ask you something. If you can't communicate what you found, did the audit really matter? A brilliant finding buried in a report nobody reads changes nothing. This chapter is all about the output, turning your work into something that drives action. And I promise you, this is a skill that separates good auditors from great ones. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the executive summary, that one page that actually gets read. Then, we'll cover how to describe your methodology and scope honestly so no one can say you overreached. We'll draw the crucial line between findings and observations and learn to grade severity fairly. From there, we go deeper into root cause, moving past what happened to why it happened. We'll also talk about making AI risk understandable through analogies and visuals, and tailoring your message differently for a board versus a technical lead. Finally, we'll cover management responses, remediation timelines, and the follow-up that tracks fixes all the way to closure. Because an audit isn't done when the report ships, it's done when the risk is actually addressed. Let's get into it. Ever. So here's the question. If that one page is all they see, is it doing its job? The executive summary is not a warm-up. It's the whole audit compressed into something a busy leader can absorb in 90 seconds. It should answer three things fast. What did we look at? What did we find? And how bad is it? That's it. Let me give you a contrast. I once saw a summary that opened with 3 paragraphs on methodology before mentioning that the model was illegally discriminating against applicants. By the time you reached the point, you'd lost the reader. Compare that to one that opened with, "This model shows evidence of bias that creates legal and reputational risk. 3 high-priority issues need attention." Which one gets action? So here's my coaching. Lead with the punchline. Put the risk and its business impact right up top. Use plain language, not jargon. And remember, you're not writing to impress. You're writing to be understood by someone with 15 other fires to fight. Respect their time, and they'll respect your findings. Now let's talk about something that protects both you and your reader, being crystal clear about what you did and didn't do. This might feel like fine print, but it's actually one of your strongest shields. Here's why it matters. Imagine you audited a model's fairness but didn't test its security. 6 months later, there's a security breach, and someone points at your report and asks, "Why didn't you catch this?" If your scope clearly stated you didn't examine security, you're protected. If it didn't, you're in an awkward spot. So methodology and scope aren't boring formalities. They set expectations honestly. You're telling the reader, "Here's what I examined, here's how, and here's what I deliberately left out." Think of it like a home inspector. A good inspector says, "I checked the roof and the plumbing, but I did not open the walls or test the pool." That honesty isn't weakness, it's professionalism. So when you write this section, be specific. What data did you sample? What time period? What was out of bounds? Clear boundaries prevent people from assuming your audit covered more than it did, and that assumption is where auditors get burned. Let's clear up a distinction that trips up a lot of auditors: the difference between a finding and an observation. Get this wrong, and you either cry wolf or you understate real danger. Here's the simple version. A finding is a genuine problem. Something's broken, non-compliant, or creating real risk right now. An observation is more of a heads up. It's working today, but here's something worth improving before it becomes a problem. Think of a finding as a leaking pipe and an observation as a pipe that's a bit old and worth watching. Why does mixing these up hurt you? If you flag every minor thing as a critical finding, people stop taking you seriously. But if you soft pedal a real problem as a mere observation, you failed in your duty. Calibration is everything. And that leads to severity grading. Not all findings are equal. A high severity finding might be active discrimination with legal exposure. A low one might be missing documentation. Here's my advice. Tie severity to business impact, not technical tidiness. A messy codebase is annoying, but a biased loan model is a lawsuit. Grade by what actually hurts the organization, and your reports will guide action where it truly counts. Here's where auditing gets genuinely satisfying. Anyone can report what went wrong. The real value is explaining why. Let me show you the difference. Suppose you find that a model is biased against a certain group. That's the what. But if you stop there, the fix will be shallow. The team patches the symptom and the same problem resurfaces elsewhere. Root cause analysis asks, why did this happen in the first place? Maybe the biased outcome traces back to training data that underrepresented that group. But go further. Why was the data like that? Perhaps because no one reviewed the data set for representativeness. And why not? Because there was no governance step requiring it. Now you're at the real root, a missing control, not just a bad number. There's a technique I love called the 5 whys. You just keep asking why until you hit something structural. When I worked on a data project, we traced a recurring error through 5 whys and discovered the actual cause was a handoff no one owned. So here's my challenge to you. Don't stop at the surface. The deeper you dig, the more your recommendations actually prevent recurrence instead of just mopping up. Let me ask you something. If you tell a board member that your model has a disparate impact ratio below the 4/5 threshold, what do you think they hear? Often, noise. This is where analogies and visuals become your superpower. Your job isn't to sound smart, it's to make people understand risk fast enough to act. So instead of that jargon, you might say, for every 10 men this model approves, it only approves 7 similar women. That's a fairness gap regulators care about. Same fact, suddenly it lands. Visuals do the same heavy lifting. A simple bar chart showing approval rates side by side communicates bias faster than a page of statistics. Think of how a weather map shows a storm. You instantly grasp the danger without reading a meteorology textbook. Here's my coaching. Match the picture to the point. Showing drift over time? Use a line trending in the wrong direction. Showing group disparity? Use side-by-side bars. And test your analogy on someone non-technical before the meeting. If your spouse or a friend gets it, the board will too. Clarity isn't dumbing down, it's respect for your audience's time and attention. Here's a mistake I see constantly. Auditors write one report and send the same version to everyone. But think about it. Does a board member need the same detail as the engineer who has to fix the code? Of course not. Let me break down your 3 audiences. The board cares about strategic risk. Is this going to hurt us legally, financially, or reputationally? Keep it high level, tie it to consequences, skip the technical depth. Executives sit in the middle. They want to know impact and what it'll cost to fix because they're allocating resources. Then there's the technical lead. This person actually needs the specifics. Which feature, which data set, which line of the pipeline. Give them the detail the board would drown in. Here's an analogy. Think of a doctor explaining an illness. To the patient's family, it's serious but treatable. To the surgeon, it's the precise anatomy and procedure. Same diagnosis, completely different conversation. So before you send anything, ask, who's reading this and what decision do they need to make? Write to that decision. 1 finding, 3 tellings, and each one lands with the person who has to act on it. So you've delivered your findings. Now comes a part that's easy to underestimate, the management response. Here's why it's so important. Your report identifies problems, but management owns the fixes. This is where accountability actually gets nailed down. A proper management response does 3 things. It acknowledges the finding, it commits to a specific action, and it names a date and an owner. Notice all 3 matter. We'll look into it is not a commitment, it's a shrug. The data science team will retrain the model with a balanced data set by March 31st is a commitment. Let me highlight the trap. Vague responses with no owner and no deadline are where remediation goes to die. I've seen findings sit open for 2 years because the response said ongoing and nobody was accountable. So here's your role. Push for specifics. Who, what, and by when. And watch for responses that quietly reject the finding without saying so. Phrases like, management believes existing controls are adequate. If you disagree, that disagreement belongs in the report too. A good response section turns your findings from suggestions into tracked, owned commitments. Let's finish this chapter with the step everyone forgets: follow up. Here's a question that should keep auditors honest. If you find a problem, report it, get a nice commitment, and then never check back. Did you actually reduce any risk? Not really. The audit isn't finished when the report is issued. It's finished when the risk is genuinely addressed. Follow-up is how you verify that the fix actually happened and, crucially, that it worked. And here's a subtlety. Don't just take management's word that something's closed. Verify it. If they say they retrained the model to remove bias, go test the new model. I've seen situations where a fix was reported as complete, but the biased version was still running in production because the deployment never happened. Think of it like a doctor's follow-up appointment. They don't just prescribe medicine and assume you're cured. They check whether you actually recovered. So build tracking into your process. Keep a log of open findings, target dates, and current status. Chase the overdue ones. Closing the loop is what turns an audit from a report into real, lasting change. And that's the whole point, isn't it?